repeat the nonconformist oath. I promise to be different. I promise to be unique. I promise not to repeat things other people say.
Hey, welcome back to Positive Blatherings. It's always a really joyful experience for me when I have the folks that come in here like this guy. I want to say his name is David Autovino, but I also want to say his name is David Wine Car. Like, what is the translation of that? Autovino.
Autovino. It actually translates to winemaker.
Winemaker.
So, yeah. So at some point in my family's history, we must have made wine.
Nice. Now you just wine as opposed to making wine. Go! Hey!
Oh, man. Already with the zingers. I was just telling you, I was just sitting down here saying how comfortable I feel, how there's candles and there's flowers, and now the claws come out. Honestly, this is a gotcha interview. No, I always wished that if I delved into my family's history, that I could discover that, like, oh, it turns out that, the Autovinos have owned a winery in Italy for years and years. No, nothing like that.
You don't come from some sort of Italian, Tuscan royalty or something like that?
Yeah, no, unfortunately. So we must have made the Italian equivalent of $2 Chuck, of $2 Chianti, $2. So, yeah, no illustrious history there. But at one point, a very funny friend of mine in college, it had never occurred to me before, but the first time he heard my last name, he just, like, off the top of his head, he was like, oh, so Auto is in car, Vino is in wine, but don't drink and drive. Hey. I've stolen that from him over the years because it's somewhat pithy. I think it's pithy the first time, but for me, it's been 25 years. So.
When I was drinking, I would have loved to have developed some sort of Autovino, sort of an automatic wine, dispenser that you just sit there and.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, as long as it's a good vintage and not an Autovino vintage necessarily, because we made the worst stuff.
Do you have any information about, like, where your family comes from specifically?
At one point, yeah. I mean, my family is from the Autovinos are from Sicily, but I also have some Italian family in Palermo, and that's as far. Like, someone contacted my father. Back when the internet was new and you could just sort of discover, like, what, this person in America, same last name, same last name as me. What? I send them email and like nothing ever. So there were some hellos and then nothing ever came of it. So
were they definitely related, or was it just a coincidence?
As far as we know, I think. I mean, I don't believe the name Autovino is as common in Italy, I'm led to understand, as, say, I don't know, what's like an English speaking name that means you're like Crofter, like or Crofton, like in English, which means, like, at some point they were a barrel maker.
Oh, right.
That's your last name, or I can't think of any other examples, but as far as I can tell, there are not many Autovinos out there in the world.
You're the only one I've ever heard of.
We're a special breed.
You
are a rare animal. Yeah.
Well, speaking of rare animals, so this guy, David Autovino, is one of the most talented voice artists that I know. He's also a voice coach and an actor doing stage and screen and pretty much anything that he can get his acting hands on.
Which is, I mean,
But that's what you do.
That is kind of what you do, I think I went to college to learn I went to acting school to become an actor, not really thinking about, like, well, in what way am I going to pursue making money? What am I going to do? Make movies? Am I going to be a stage actor? Like, you don't know that, I think, especially because it was the 1990s when financially everything was fine. You were like, I could go to college and become an actor. I won't worry about what to specialize in yet. The work will come. Right. Surely. They'll all come lining up at my door. asking me to do stuff. No, it's just it is funny how life sort of guides you by this very circuitous route toward the thing. And if you sort of just follow the doors that open to you, sometimes that can lead you to a place where you sort of find what you're kind of meant to do. Before I ever started doing voiceover work, I was in a play with a wonderful director who at one point just offhandedly said to me, "Autovino, you're the kind of actor who finds his character through his voice." And that it never occurred to me that would be like sort of the main part of my career someday. But it is absolutely true. When if I'm handed a script, sort of the first thing that occurs to me as I'm reading it is I'm hearing how that person speaks in my head. You know, you see words on a page, and it's an actor's job to sort of Sherlock Holmes that backward and think, well, who is the person that would say these words?
Right.
And so you imagine this whole person, and you imagine what they look like, how they move, and especially what they sound like and what they talk like, because that's all I'm seeing is the words that they say. That's all the clues that I'm given.
Right.
So the way in which we speak, I think, does have a particularly aesthetic appeal for me, because for so much of our interpersonal, communication, the way we speak is so vital. And in fact, I just read something interesting about the young people,
Kids today.
the kids today who have grown up with primarily text-based communication. And so there are all these sort of unspoken social cues that lie in text-based communication. Like, they know intuitively that you cannot express sarcasm in a text. And so you end your message with like a forward slash and an S to indicate sarcasm. That is just sort of this part of internet parlance,
right?
In order to express tone, so that you're not misunderstood, so that people don't take you the wrong way. That those of us who grew up with a rotary phone,
right, and
in our kitchens,
I'm constantly being taken the wrong way with my texts. This is actually an ongoing theme for a couple of people that I know right now, and we've been talking about it on some podcasts and things like that, just about how the way you express yourself in text, where it can lead to, where the intentions, where they really are, and how they're perceived. And it's oftentimes even the most innocent of communications suddenly is like turns into this thing.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's not at all what I meant. And it's like, but that's how we did this. We did a piece where we texted back and forth. And then when we got on the show, she said, "This is how I heard it." And so she read it out.
That's great.
And then I'm like, well, this is how I said it in my head. And it was like night and day. Same words.
Yeah.
Same words, night and day.
Completely different.
Now, what do the kids do to them? Do they say like /S? Like
yeah, no, well, what I think is funny is also as someone who also is kind of a grammar nerd is how I see them use punctuation, especially to express. I mean, they essentially just don't use punctuation anymore. And so when I look at something like that and read it in my head, it has a stream of consciousness kind of quality to it. And then if there's no period, it's almost as if seeing a period at the end of a sentence online is so rare that when I do see it, it carries this extra weight of finality, that's like, no, this is serious. All right. Take me seriously because I am ending this thought with a period. It's like, it almost unconsciously communicates that like, I will hear no arguments against this. This is God's honest. This is the firm truth, and like, no, it has a period. You cannot debate me.
Or what about when they have a period after each word in the sentence?
That's how I write.
That's what I did. That's really final.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, geez. I mean, yeah. It conveys anger, and So when it's funny. So I do, coach and teach some workshops from time to time. And a big part of that is script analysis, right? Mm-hmm. And that is dependent on reading a script that you know that someone has consciously written to a purpose, and that the punctuation is very specifically thought out, so that like if you get to a place where there's a comma and you know that this is a good writer who has put that comma there for a reason, you can't just blow past the comma. Right. You can't it's got to be in there. At the same time, I have to also coach people because part of this business is not only is it, beautiful, well-written works of drama and comedy, it's also advertising, in which case you're not necessarily working with, it's not Shakespeare. I'm sure, obviously copywriters are usually good writers, but they're not writing something to be beautiful.
Right. It's not literature.
It's not literature. Exactly. And so those cues are almost completely different in teaching someone how to speak that, because they're not necessarily as guided by the way it's written, or maybe they are guided in a different way. And figuring out, because like advertising copy has things like calls to action and, like this is the point. And then, and here's the brand name. So this needs to be accentuated in some way. Right. So there's a whole different way of speaking.
Yeah. Did you, going back to when you were, kind of first getting started, did you run into any, like, what was the biggest hurdle or opposition personally that you had to overcome in order to continue down this path of acting and performing?
It was, really just, it was no one hurdle. It's merely, I think, the fact that it is a tough business for a lot of reasons. One, it does not pay well, and yet it is highly competitive. There's a lot of jobs like that, but this is one of those jobs that I think, like teaching. I come from a family of teachers. I'm married to a public education teacher, so I use this analogy a lot, because that, I think, is one of those professions that people are called to it. It's a calling. They do it because they're passionate about it. Mm-hmm. And so it is easy to let yourself be abused a little bit when it's something you're passionate about. You're willing to accept a pay cut. You're willing to accept terrible hours because what you're doing is meaningful. And acting is a lot like that, because it's a calling. There are lots of people who, people want to pay you peanuts. And financially, it's not exactly a winning proposition unless you are at the very tippy top, the 0.01% of blockbuster Hollywood films that rake in millions. So A, it's not a real sound financial decision going in, and B, there's a lot of people competing. Something that they told me right away in college is that you're not special. Yes, there are special things about you, but you're going to go out and you're going to look for a job, and there are going to be at least 20 other people who are not only as talented as you, who not only have worked as hard as you, no matter how much work and effort you've put in, but they also kind of look like you. Yeah. That's just, when you play the numbers game, there's going to be a lot of people who are basically the same value proposition.
Like up against a bunch of versions of yourself.
Exactly.
I never really thought about that, but that's true.
You're up against all these doppelgangers of yourself with very subtle variations. You are 24, you're in a room with 24 subtly different shades of green. And so no matter how hard you've worked, no matter what sort of effort you put into, the director's just looking for just the right shade of green, because they know at that point they're all getting, very well trained shades of green.
Right.
You just need to match what they have in mind. And so that also teaches you that it's not really your fault. As long as you really are working hard and doing your best, that those failures, it's not a personal failing. It's just that you weren't the right shade of green that time. Next time you will be. It's a numbers game. And so that is always difficult, and it takes, I think, years of failure before you finally sort of realize that, like, it's okay, and I can let go of the things that I thought I wanted and I didn't get because I was the wrong shade of green. because if they had chosen me for that job, I would have had to fit the exact shade of green that they wanted. I would have had to bend and break, and that's always terrible. Those are the worst kind of jobs where you have to really sort of like force your own creativity to fit someone else's. It should come naturally. The best jobs are the ones where the juices are flowing and everyone's being creative and everyone's working well with each other and it all just kind of clicks. And so the jobs that you didn't get chosen for are usually the ones where that wouldn't have happened anyway.
Right.
That's why you didn't get picked.
Yeah.
Because you weren't the best fit. So you let that one go. And that is always difficult to do, to make sure that you can close the door mentally on those things you thought you wanted and realize it wouldn't have been what I wanted anyway.
So you come across as a real confident guy. Like there's,
Do I look, just because I'm better than everyone else doesn't make me a confident guy. I would say I'm probably the best at being confident that I've ever, out of anyone I've ever met though. So
well, that sounds like someone. Sounds like someone I've heard before. No, so going back as a child, now you talked about college. I don't know if you maybe high school being in theater.
Yeah.
But going back as a child, as a little Autovino.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was the signal to your parents or to people around you that were you told that you're probably going to be like, here's our theater kid, or here's our performer, or here's our actor? Were you like the class clown and stuff like that?
No, absolutely not. I was, I was just a real skinny, squirrely little weirdo, nerdy boy, who I think didn't really fit in anywhere. And when I was 12, my dad played me Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and that changed the course of my life. That was the first time I had seen, like, I got comedy. Comedy made sense. Like, oh.
And that's a certain brand of comedy, too, that doesn't actually connect with everyone.
Yeah. But it is
very specific.
It is very specific, but it's also a master class in how comedy is structured. Yeah. Even if I didn't have the vocabulary to express that at the time, the way that, it's a sketch movie. It is a series of comic sketches loosely linked by this overall theme. And it's up to the audience members to sort of assemble the plot themselves. But they were brilliant. And it was the sort of comedy that I'd never experienced before. So I loved it so much that summer I had the opportunity to sign up for a Shakespeare class where you would put on a play for like 2 weeks, like a summer camp kind of thing. And I was like, Shakespeare, that's got to be like Monty Python, right? Because A, British, B, old-timey, like the Holy Grail, like King Arthur and stuff. That's Shakespeare, right? So I thought, this is going to be hilarious. I'm doing it. And it was Macbeth, one of the most serious, heavy tragedies. Everyone dies. It's an absolute bloodbath, psychological horror. Sorry, no spoilers. I know, it's a little soon for spoilers for a 400-year-old work. I apologize. And Willie Shakes has been disappointing me ever since. But
Willie Shakes.
No, me and Billy Shakes have a good relationship, I think. But ever since, so that was the very first time. So it was just by luck. It was because I wanted to do something Monty Python-ish that I got up on stage, and it turned out learning lines and pretending to be someone else in front of people was just the greatest. It was just the best feeling in the world. No
stage fright.
No, not at all. And I know that that's a weird mental thing. I feel like for some people I know that is just, nope, not going to, couldn't get over that. Could not get over the nervousness of getting up in front of people and speaking. And I don't know why I just don't have that bone.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if it is maybe because my dad was a public school teacher and got up and he was in fact my own teacher. And so I saw him get up and speak in front of people.
Wait, so you had your dad as a teacher?
My dad was my math teacher in 8th grade.
I didn't think that could happen. I thought they made you go take a different class.
I think he was. So I went to a very small rural high school out in Wayne County. Yeah, no, I think he was probably the only teacher teaching, that section of math, and then later he was in the process of getting his getting a second master's degree in administration. So by the end of high school, he was also my principal. So I saw him.
That must have been crazy.
There was one time we were planning like we were planning a big senior prank, or I think a senior skip day or something. And, I think we were gonna wear something ridiculous. It was some hilarious punk prank that we were gonna pull. And my dad grabs me first thing, like right after the first bell rings, just pulls me aside in the hallway and says, I know what you're going to do. I'm telling you right now, do not do it. I have no idea how he knew. I have no idea who squealed, but he just, he had his ear to the ground. He had his spies. He had his little birds reporting back, and he knew, so I couldn't get in trouble because he knew what we were planning before I was even going to do it. So it was either it was that, or maybe it's just my Italian grandmother who is a natural storyteller and talks with her hands exactly as I'm doing right now. And so
you do have that storytelling, blood.
Yeah. I just, that was never one of those feelings that I just don't, I just don't know what it feels like to be embarrassed to be up in front of other people, but I get it. I understand there are things I would be embarrassed to do. I think, I don't know. I've been pretty debased in many times in my career. Like my parents have seen me naked on stage. My parents have seen body parts of me in shows, tastefully done, artistically done, of course. Yeah. I live a life of very little shame.
So, but as a coach, how do you deal with your students who are perhaps experiencing really, really intense fear and stage fright and things like that? How do you coach them through that?
I mean, I think the only thing that I can do, because I know that there are people who do pursue this kind of thing, and I think eventually they find their path to it. They find their path toward artistic expression. In fact, I think for a lot of people, voiceover in particular is the best avenue for them, because it necessitates that you can be alone. You don't have to do it in front of people. It's something you make yourself, and you can pour your heart and soul and creativity into it, and then you share it with the world. It's not, you don't have to do it in front of people in real time. And I think that level of distance appeals to a lot of people who would never get up on a stage and deliver a Shakespearean sonnet in front of a crowd of 200 people. Sure. And so I think there is that, but the other thing is that honestly, it is so much fun. And that's whenever I teach or coach, this is fun for me. There is nothing more fun for me than saying words and pretending to be someone. It's pretending. It's play. It is fundamentally this delightful, fun thing. So the more I can express to people, and the more I can sort of get them to feel that fun, that fun more often than not conquers the fear. Like if they get bitten by that bug and they feel that feeling of like, I've never been able to express, because it is a vehicle to express emotions and extreme states of mind, and that is a powerful drug. Let me tell you what. And once people feel that, they usually want more, and fear becomes less and less of an obstacle to them.
I have some experience performing.
Let's hear it. Come on. All right, now I know. So you were in Chippendales for a while, I understand, and
yeah, you saw that bit with me and Patrick Swayze. Yeah. No, so I did a play a few years ago. I don't remember. Maybe I don't even remember.
Oh, really?
2016. I did Biloxi Blues, and I played Sergeant Toomey, which is a pretty big. There's a lot of lines. There's a lot of lines, and that's the one thing about just stage performing and stuff that really is what gets me with, why I respect people that go out and do these stage performances, because, especially some of these big Shakespearean plays where you have to rehearse this and memorize this stuff. And unless you're really, really, really smart, it's hard to even know what the hell you're saying. The Shakespeare for the average person, the average person doesn't know what the hell's going on with a Shakespeare play, because it's just like, what are they saying? They're speaking English words, but they're all jumbled up and it doesn't make any sense. So to go through and memorize that whole play and put yourself into this character who is essentially speaking another language.
Yeah.
That
is tough.
is amazing to me. And because I had a hell of a time memorizing my lines. And I remember this, I think we did 3 or 4 shows, and we were in a smaller venue, so there wasn't really much of a stage. We were kind of just a little bit in front of the audience. They were kind of like right there.
Oh, so you could see them. Yeah, that's terrifying.
And
nobody wants that.
Somebody sneezed right in the front row, and I said, "Bless you." And
why wouldn't you?
It was terrible because it's one of my cringeworthy memories, because I'm like, why didn't I just let that go? You're supposed to let that go. As a performer, you're supposed to, the audience is just seeing you through the glass, and you're not, breaking the fourth wall. You're not supposed to. And oh God, and it was downhill from there. Oh, no. I got in my head. I started missing lines and stuff like that. It all ended up being okay, and the average person probably didn't, notice that much, except for that.
But that is the worst, when you feel like, oh, I have made this mistake and everyone knows, right. and that's when you feel really seen, because it's so what the freedom of acting is being someone else, and so it's not you up there. That's a big part of getting over that fear, is understanding that they're not seeing me, the person. They're not seeing my fears and vulnerabilities. It's the character. And so as the character, I can do all these things. And so the mistakes where you break that illusion, those mistakes where you're like, oh no, they saw me. Oh, that's when you feel totally naked and vulnerable up
that's
there.
it. That's it, exactly. I was the guy. I wasn't Sergeant Toomey anymore. I was me up there pretending to be this guy instead of actually being the guy.
Yeah. I mean, no, the great thing about, Neil Simon is one of my favorite playwrights. He's one of those playwrights who I saw as a kid, and I'm like, oh, the plays can be this funny, fantastic, you know. And so there are, especially with a really good comedy, there is you establish a relationship with the audience when there's laughter. That's a real back and forth, because then your acting gets sort of dependent on the timing of how they're reacting to you and making sure that your punchlines land. And I could see, given the right Neil Simon show and the right setting, and like breaking character for a second, saying, "Oh, bless you," like that could just get another laugh, and then you're just rolling. Well, along.
It did, but I don't know if they were laughing at the situation or just laughing at me. The thing about Biloxi Blues, though, is that the play isn't as good as the movie.
No, I've never seen the movie.
So Christopher Walken plays Sergeant Toomey.
Oh, wow.
And his version of Sergeant Toomey is so great that it was real. And this is a question for you, because it was really difficult for me to disregard his performance, to do it according to how the play should be and not the movie. How does seeing someone else, another actor portraying a character that you're about to portray, how does that affect you, and how do you get rid of it?
It's a great question, because I'm going through that right now, in fact. So I will be in a production of The Producers. Mel Brooks is The Producers this May to June. And so rehearsals have not begun yet, but I'm playing the role of Max Bialystock, who has two very famous interpretations on film. In the original Mel Brooks film, portrayed by the incomparable Zero Mostel, famous for originating the role of Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. He is so different from me. He's older. He's a much larger guy. He's got a very different comedic presence than I do. And then a second time in the musical film starring Nathan Lane, who originated the role on Broadway in the musical version that Mel Brooks also wrote himself and wrote all the songs and all the music. So they are both very much Mel Brooks of his mind. And so there's these two very famous portrayals of this character, neither of whom, and even for I think a certain amount of fan base, there is a third, and that's Larry David, when he spent an entire season of his show, Curb Your Enthusiasm, starring in a production of The Producers alongside David Schwimmer. And so I have seen them all. I've seen all of these productions. And I know that they inhabit these roles so naturally because the roles were sort of created and built around them. They're both, Zero Mostel and Nathan Lane are both iconic performers with their own distinct comedic styles. And having originated both versions of this role, they inhabit it so naturally. It's hard to imagine the role being played by anyone else other than these two guys. And I'm a very different kind of guy. I have a very different comic energy. And so naturally, there are a lot of things that I am choosing to do that are going to inherently overlap because there are some rules of comedy, like the beats and patter of a certain joke. It's got a natural cadence. It's built into the writing, right? Because as we said before, good writing works that way. It has an inherent flow and cadence. That said, there are some jokes that just won't land if I say it like those guys. And also there are ways that not necessarily that I think are funnier ways to say it, but I think there are ways that will sound funnier coming out of my mouth. And so I do find myself making a lot of strategic decisions and sometimes second guessing myself saying like, is this too close to Nathan Lane? Or by the same token, is this too different that it's going to throw people off who have listened to the soundtrack a million times? And so I think the thing to always go back to is I have this acting training where I have to stop and just sort of objectively look at the words on the page and be like, who is this person? What are the fundamental qualities of this person? And then I can let my natural instinct take over. When I see that if I know this person, if I understand what motivates them, then it naturally follows that I'll be able to understand how they would say something. And whether or not that aligns with the way that Zero Mostel said it or the way that Nathan Lane said it almost becomes immaterial because I have a framework in order to understand this person. And that can naturally lead me to the way in which I need to say it. So while I'm conscious of it, I'm definitely always making my own decisions because it comes from my own understanding of who this slime bucket is. And it's great. Playing slime buckets is the best. Right? It's just wonderful, especially the ones that are craven and cowardly and you see them fail. It's great it's great good fun to show these parts of the human experience, the times where we let our egos take over, where we hurt other people just to get what we want, where we may violate the rules of civil society. It's like a completely sanctioned off little purge. It's like the purge and it's happening on stage and only I get to do it. Everyone else just gets to watch.
You're like, I've been dying to be an asshole for so long and now I can do it.
I've been holding this in for years. I'm going to let you people know what I think about you.
What is there a role that you've always wanted to, have without that you haven't gotten a chance to do yet? And maybe not specifically, a certain role from a certain play, but is there have you done a lot of dramas or are you sticking mainly to comedy or what is it something you want to do you haven't done yet?
I have been very lucky that in my career I have gotten to I have gotten to be the most ridiculous comic personalities you can think of, and I have also gotten to be the people that are driven to the absolute brink of desperation with tears rolling down my face. Like I've gotten to really gotten to play at the extreme ends of the human experience, and so often it's kind of like asking, like, is there a particular meal that you're hungry for? Because it kind of depends. Like, well, what have I been eating a lot of lately? Do I need, am I in the mood for something that I haven't had in a while? I would say I have not had the chance in a while to really, really show that dramatic vulnerability. Because getting to cry in a role, I gotta tell you, it's better than therapy. It is. It just letting every fiber of your being go to that place where you have absolute release and absolute vulnerability. But then you don't have to live with the consequences. You get to put that aside and go on and pick up your kids at school and everything's fine. Just getting to sort of sublimate all your own feelings and frustrations into that and release it is fantastic. So, and I think I could use a little bit of that right now, honestly. But by the same token, I'm getting to explore, I am working on a Mel Brooks show right now, and it's comedy school. The patter, the jokes, the way that they land, they are all flawlessly structured in this beautiful rhythm. And that really has such a joy. The only time I really get jealous and think like, oh, I want to do that role is when I see like a tall, handsome guy that I admire, the kind of role that I can never really play in real life, being the short little weirdo that I am. And there are actors that I admire. Pedro Pascal, is because he's my age. He's playing all these famous now for The Mandalorian and for The Last of Us, where, he is this dad figure escorting vulnerable magical children to safety and protecting them. He gets to play these wonderful cowboy like stoic roles where he is deadly serious but knows guided by the sense of right and wrong. I love that kind of role. That's a real hero. That's really very cool. And that's the kind of, I'd love to do something like that someday. It'll have to be voiceover though, so that people don't see my actual face and they can see something.
They can do
much
a lot
more heroic.
There's a lot of technology. They can make you tall. They made Elijah Wood and all those guys from the, in
the Hobbit. Yeah. Made them in the Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. They made him look like really small next to.
Oh man. Yeah. No, with motion capture, you can be in. Well, I tell you what, that's another actor, an actor that I think I admire more than anyone else is Andy Serkis from the Lord of the Rings.
That guy is insanely talented.
He is the modern day Lon Chaney.
Really?
He's the man of a million faces.
Yeah.
He can do it all. He can not only just his body, just the way that he has such. And it's because he's a classically trained stage actor that he has the background to be able to use his entire physicality and bring it to his performance. That's how he can play Gollum. It's how he can play an ape. It's how he can play, all these just wildly different characters and change his voice with it and also just be a damn fine actor.
Yeah.
That sort of being a chameleon has always appealed to me. It blows my mind whenever I see him yet again completely transform himself into something. Tilda Swinton too. She's one of those chameleons that can just do anything and completely change the way she looks and feels and inhabits the world and just become a totally different person. That's, again, it's the fun of pretending. It's the fun of like, if I put on this pirate costume, how piratey can I get? If I put on this knight costume, how knighty can I get? It is the fun of playing pretend as a kid to the utmost extreme. I don't think I really answered the question, but I'll tell you what, I'm confident that I gave an answer I'm satisfied with.
How do you feel about method acting and that whole process of getting into the character?
I think it's widely misunderstood. is the thing. I think it is the way that most people look at it is the way that it is often incorrectly applied in Hollywood, because that is a very different process than the process of applying it to the stage, where it was originally. So it has its roots in modded. Okay, I'm going to try not to give a history lesson on this podcast, but
please do.
130 years ago, there was a Russian acting troupe who invented modern acting, and the biggest revelation that they came up with was, what if we behaved like actual real people? With fully thought out psychologies who lie. What if we behaved and spoke like people who do not always say what is exactly on their minds? That was Shakespeare's big contribution to storytelling. Is Shakespeare gave characters real psychological depth. They weren't realistic characters because they constantly said exactly what was on their minds. And often it took them 2 pages of a monologue to say it. But they did express a real psychological depth that characters didn't have before. And then 400 years later, Stanislavski thought, well, now, wait a minute. What if we talk the way that real people talk, where they don't always say what's on their minds? In fact, people often say the exact opposite of what is really going on in their heads in order to hide what's going on in their heads because they don't want to be vulnerable. What if we talked like that? And so so like they taught someone, and then that person taught someone. Stanislavski teaches Uta Hagen, and so there's this succession of taught Stanford Meisner, and so there's this succession of acting teachers, and this style of acting gets sort of reduced into a communicable, set of instructions that comes to be known as the method. And all it is a framework for teaching actors how to do that, really. It's teaching actors how to just be a real person in front of other people and think really critically about how real people behave. And the interpretation of that, the way that mutated, that Hollywood actor, that mutated that into you must live and breathe your character and be them every day and be obnoxious on set, is I think sort of it's the antithesis of being a professional, because you also have to get along, because this is a job. We are making art and we are damn lucky to get paid to make art, but this is a job. And so if your creative process, if you're a Jared Leto and your creative process starts getting in the way of other people's comfort and other people's safety, and you're sending used condoms to try and, to get to the heart of your character's psychosis, you are not only ruining a good time for everyone else, but you're also wasting a lot of energy that would be much better spent on just getting the shot. Everyone is here for you. There's dozens of crew people bleeding money every day. Just focus on what the audience needs to see. Cut your bullshit. If you're really truly doing the work, you've done that homework on your own. You don't need to do it in front of everyone else. It's prep work. Real method acting, it is preparation. And if you're bringing all these psychoses with you to work and inflicting it upon everyone else, I think that's a bastardization of the original idea of method acting. I apologize. That was a long-winded historical answer.
That's exactly what I was looking for.
Because humans have been doing this for thousands of years. We've been getting up in front of people and telling stories as other people. And so this is just sort of the most recent style of doing that. And if it causes harm to other people and inhibits the process of doing that work so that the audience gets to hear the story, don't. You can't do that.
Who was it? Was it Brian Cox that said it? There's a quote going around from Brian Cox where he was talking about somebody, how they were method acting. And he's like, well, it's acting. You don't have to do all that. You're supposed to act. You don't have to become the character and live like them for 6 months. Mm-hmm. You're supposed to act.
Yeah.
Like do it on set, do it on stage. You don't have to be that person.
And that's another thing. Yeah. And the reason that he said that is because he's also a stage. He's had such an amazing film career, but also he's got that sort of stage training whereby he knows that what you choose, the way that you choose to inhabit a person, the way that you choose to inhabit their mannerisms and the way that they speak, it's got to be repeatable. It's got to be sustainable. You have to do it 8 shows a week if you're performing in the West End,
Right.
if you're performing on Broadway. And you need to do it the same way every night. It's not, you don't just sort of get in the mood to act. No, all that prep work is so that you have developed a pathway for yourself to be able to reliably repeat expressing these emotions to an audience every single night. And in order to do that, you don't have to live for 6 months. You just have to do your homework and figure out what is it that the audience needs to see, so that, so that it's mass production in a way. But there are also, a whole crew of actors that want to be actors because they are film fans, and that's great and wonderful. But if they don't eventually learn that making films and television is not just, I just have to really be emotional and get one great shot, because they just have to film it one time, they're in for a rude awakening, my friend. Especially if you're on set all day doing 20 takes of something just to get it right. And to match the opposite shots. Like, it's
I know
work.
a lot of people don't realize that when you see this incredible scene, and it's like, you don't really know how many times they had to do that.
Yeah.
And doing multiple angles and stuff like that, you have to do it the same way every time. If you're going to lift your hand up and do this and this in this order, you got to do it the same way every time, because when we cut to the other angle, you can't have this hand up and then, all that continuity stuff.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've always been fascinated with, apart from memorizing lines and stuff. You're not just memorizing lines, you're portraying a character and you're memorizing their whole being and how they react to a certain situation.
Yeah.
And you've got to do it the same way every time. Now, maybe not the same way every time on stage, similar, because you've got blocking and you've got all that kind of stuff.
Now, here's the trick. Here's the secret.
Lay it down.
Is that all that other stuff, people who don't do this all the time usually point out, like, yes, it's very difficult to learn all those lines, but it's all that other stuff that makes it easier. It's learning the gestures, learning the blocking.
Right.
Because then the lines become more than words. Except when you associate them with an action, the lines become more than just words you have to say. It's a thing that you're doing. And that thing that you're doing, it's logical because of the thing that you just did and the thing that your scene partner just did to you. It's logical that you would then respond. But so, like, it all makes sense. And, so that's why you practice it, you get that blocking, you repeat those gestures, all of that working together to remind you what the words are, because it wouldn't make sense if you didn't say those words. Right. That's the only conclusion you can come to. Yeah,
bro. What is your advice to people who are just starting out and they want to do what you do?
Yeah, do it over and over and over again. Do it as much as you can. Get as much exposure to it as possible. That's the thing, is that there are a lot of online Zoom based classes that you can take if you're interested in doing this, but this really is a situation where experience is the best teacher. And there are so many opportunities where you can practice without fear of failure. If you want to, there's lots of jobs at which you probably should. You don't want to, like, go out and practice being a surgeon. You don't get a lot of opportunities to practice being a surgeon before actually doing it. Say, that is tough. But if you want to be an actor and you haven't gone and auditioned for your local community theater company, go do that right now. If you want to get into voiceover and you haven't checked out one of the many websites where they are looking for unpaid amateurs to provide voices for their really, really cool indie animation projects or video game project, stuff that's probably not going to generate much money, but they really want a human voice instead of having to resort to AI. Do that. There are so many opportunities, and these are always small things. It's not like the whole world is going to have their eyes on you. So you can feel free to like experiment and play around and just do your best and not worry about failing. These are pretty safe, consequence-free places to fail. So if the great thing is that the process of doing it, even at that level, is so similar to the process of doing it at the paid, I'm making a living doing this level, that once you've gone out and auditioned for your local community theater company and done a performance with them, then you've done it. You've experienced the whole process. You memorized a script. You learned blocking. You opened a show. You performed in front of an audience. That's all it is. Then you just keep doing that over and over and over again. And the more opportunities that you have to do that. And the other great thing, we all have film studios now in our pockets. If you have any interest in performing as, like, say you come up with funny sketches and you want to do sketch comedy, film it, write it down and film yourself doing it. You've got a camera. Yeah. If you want to make short films, you can do. I'm teaching a high school class, not teaching. I'm helping a high school class in Buffalo right now. Their goal is to just make a short film, a 60-second long short film. Got to tell a complete story from beginning, middle, and their tool set is their cell phones. And what this means is they've got a camera, they've got lighting. If they need spotlight, they just turn on the flashlight on the camera so you can have spotlighting where you need it. They've got, you take your camera's microphone, and you can have body mics. That's a body mic. Hide a camera in a front pocket. There you go. They've got all the tools that they need to make an amateur short film. There are no obstacles. There's no barriers. There's no one that can tell you, no, you can't explore this. The only barrier is you, man. That's you. The only person getting in your way is you. But true. I think it's true today more than it has ever been in history. Yeah.
Back in the day, if you wanted to do something like that, it costs a lot of money.
Yeah. And it costs a lot of money. And you have to, and if you don't have that money, you have to wait for someone else to put up the money. You have to wait for someone else to ask you to do it. You have to wait for someone else to give you permission to be creative. The internet is terrible in a lot of ways. There's a lot that is terrible about the internet. And in fact, I would argue there is a lot that is terrible about the democratization of everyone being able to put their ideas out there, and they are all on this equal playing field. That's how we wind up with disinformation.
Right.
But for creativity, we live in a golden age. If you have something that you want to create and express, and not even necessarily make $1 million on it, but just share it with the world. There's never been a time in history where there have been less barriers to that. And so it's a cliche, but yeah, the only barrier is you. Go out and do it. You've got the tools at your disposal.
Well, I mean, that's a perfect way to end. That's great. That's great advice. I wish we had, 2 hours to talk, but we don't. But that doesn't mean that we can't do this again.
I'm sorry I wasn't funnier. I feel like I came and told a lot of stories, got really philosophical on you. I feel like I wanted it to be pithier. I wanted to crack some zingers. I think we got a couple in there, but we might have to do this again just so that we have the chance to just be funny.
Well, yeah, we could do that. We can definitely just go in and say, let's be goofs. But I wanted to explore you as an artist and performer, and because I
feel very explored. I feel like every nook and cranny of me has been
all
examined.
Exposed now. But I want people to, because when we were doing the workshops here at RockVox, I got a lot of good feedback from those.
That's nice.
From those workshops. And so I wanted to kind of get a better idea of how you got to where you are now and how you do that. And
By climbing atop the bodies of my enemies.
Right. Yes, you're so cutthroat.
It's the best way.
So cutthroat.
Yeah, no, really. It really is about fun and making sure that people understand that this is a fun, joyful thing to do. And I think that attracts people.
Well, I really appreciate your time. I loved having this conversation. We'll definitely do it again and be all goofy and whatnot. But where can people find you? I know you said you've got a play coming out in May.
Yeah. If you are Rochester local, you can come on down to OFC Creations Theater Center, Winton Place in Brighton. Used to be Comics Cafe, used to be the Downstairs Cabaret Theater. It's been a lot of things, but I have a feeling OFC is going to be there to stay for a good long while.
That place is gorgeous.
It's wonderful.
It's so great.
It is it's a beautiful place. And every time I get to go there, I leave happier than when I came in. And so they've got a production of Kinky Boots on right now, where I helped. I served as dialect coach to transport audiences to sunny Northampton, just north of London and in England, and so you can catch Kinky Boots right now. Coming up, they've got the Golden Girls, which is a very funny drag show that they do, and then the Producers, which will run from May to June this year, and otherwise you can hear me in such video games as Cities Skylines, Brawl Stars, Payday 2, Warframe. These are mostly online games that the kids play. The kids like them. Clash Royale, some upcoming really cool games that I can't talk about yet. Yeah, I know. I can't break NDA, but
I think that's like every actor's dream, is to be on a show and say that they're working on something that they can't talk about.
It does feel
that's like the coolest thing.
Very prestigious.
It's hush hush. I can't let the cat out of the bag, but you're gonna hear about it.
Turn off those cameras. Turn off those cameras, and I'll talk. Yeah, but and you can hear me locally. You hear me in ads for Celino Law, and on the internet, you can hear me as the voice of GMC Cars and Trucks. So yeah, I'm just kind of everywhere in your ears, sneaking in. You don't know where I am, but I'm there. I'm secretly in your speakers.
I was hoping to end on a positive note, but then we just got downright creepy. But that's fine. That's fine. You got a website to show people, or
if it had a good clean URL, I would, but it's something like Wix. It's a website that I made on Wix.
That's
so
right.
It's like wixsite.davidautovino.actor.
Do the Google search because
it's easily Googleable.
There's not a lot of Autovinos, so
yeah.
we've established that.
Yes. If you Google search and you find the Autovinos that make wine. Actually, my uncle is also named David Autovino, and I have.
Where's he?
And he lives in the same town as me, so we get each other's mail. And there's actually funny. A lot of confusion. I am not former director of Hillside David Autovino. I am actor David Autovino. Please learn the difference between us. He doesn't have a personal website though, so. And I do. Winning. Thanks so much for having me on, Fitz. This is a lot of fun.
I really appreciate it. We'll see you next time on Positive Blatherings.